Welcome to the Dice Tower, a series of video reviews about board and card games. Here are your hosts.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Four Squares. My name is Z Garcia.
I'm Camilla Cleghorn.
I'm Mike Delisio.
And I'm Wendy E.
Today we are taking a look at First Empires here, the sophomore effort from Sandcastle Games, who put out Res Arcana. It was their first published game. And I personally love that game, so I was very much looking forward to their follow-up game here. This one has a map. It's sort of an area control game. It's a dice manipulation game. You're going to be moving up on various tracks, controlling little empires. The game is sort of a little game in many ways. Yeah. Before we go too much deeper into it, I think you're going to give us a little overview of how this all goes, and we'll come back and talk about it.
School 'em, Wendy.
First Empires is an area control engine building game where players are trying to earn points by moving up on tracks, completing objective cards, and controlling cities at the end of the game. On a turn, a player will roll the dice and optionally re-roll based on the far two left tracks. They will then move their armies around, conquering regions, and finally, they will move up more on tracks based on what's showing on the dice and which regions they control. The first phase of the game is rolling dice. You determine how many dice you roll based on the orange track, so we'll roll 3 here, and then you can re-roll as many times as the level of blue track that you are on. The second phase of the game is the movement phase, where you'll be moving armies around trying to gain control of regions. Now, a region is won by having the majority of meeples in the region, or by having a meeple and a temporary army, which is a sword-facing die. Armies that have lost will then go back to any region controlled by the other player. The third and final phase of the round is moving up on tracks. You'll move up on a track for each die face color that is showing, as long as you control at least one of those regions. So we control a blue region, and we do control an orange region, so we'll move up one on each. Moving up on tracks is a very important part of the game, so let's take a closer look. On the left side of each track, you have the level of the ability or action that you can take, and the right side is the victory points that you'll earn at the end of the game. This orange track allows you to roll more dice, blue allows you to re-roll those dice each round, purple lets you move, green gives you more cards, and yellow puts more armies on the board. If you ever move up to one of these purple marked victory point tracks, that means you put a city out on the board for that track. You put it in a region you'll control, and you hope to hold on to it to the end of the game, so that you can then earn the victory points on the back. At any point during the game, you can choose to fulfill objectives on cards for endgame points, or you can discard a card to change a die face to any one that you desire. At the end of 7 rounds, you will then score points. Points are based on victory points on cards, each level that your track is at, and then finally cities that you've conquered or cities that you've been able to maintain throughout the game. The person with the most points wins.
All right, so there we go. Expectations. I guess we can talk about that a little bit first. We should start there. Anybody know about this already, or even if they didn't, when they saw, what were you expecting?
I knew nothing about it other than it was a game from, as you mentioned, Sandcastle, which, now we've seen 2 from them. Yeah. I kind of feel like they've got a bit of a niche they're working on with these small box games that kind of present a little bit differently than the box size would make you think. Yeah. And the second thing is we talked about, or maybe you talked about it when this came up in the news, that it has a very particular look.
Sure does.
It looks very similar to Days of Wonder games.
Especially if you don't know the box size, because it's only a picture. This 100% looks like vintage Days of Wonder.
Right.
That's because it's the same artist. I mean, that's obvious.
That makes sense.
And I believe, I might be mistaken, but I believe the person who runs Sandcastle Games used to work for Days of Wonder.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
So who's played Res Arcana? Because I have not.
I've played.
I have.
You two have. I have it. Yeah. No.
And we have different opinions on that.
Oh yeah, you don't really like that game very much.
I'm not a huge fan of it. I kind of get the appeal, but it's not my type of game. I wonder how you two would feel about it.
Yeah, I don't know, and not having played that, I came into this game with no expectations at all. I was really drawn to the cover. When it first showed up at the office, I was like, "Oh, that's really pretty. What is that? Can I touch it?" and then it was kind of just described, "Oh, it's area control," and I was like, "Oh, that's not my favorite mechanism." Right. And I was like, "Oh, but hey, it's dice and that mitigation, manipulation of the dice, you know, and I really liked that idea going up tracks, and so I thought it was, I think I didn't know much, but I was excited, or intrigued, I should say, as the more I learned about it, because I thought it was an interesting mesh of mechanisms that I was excited to try.
Yeah, I was excited because, again, I liked the company already, what they'd done before. I liked the look very much, and then the little bit of information that was out there sounded intriguing. Sort of dice manipulation, conquest, but done in I almost want to say slight way, because and the game is sort of a slight game. It's a very small game in many ways. So I was excited about that, what that could present. It's sort of Yahtzee meets area control in a lot of ways, you know, with this sort of re-rolling, getting the things you need, and then controlling things, and being opportunistic, I would say, when I need to be on this area, so I'm going to walk in there and boot you out of there.
Sure.
I like the mechanical ideas behind moving up on tracks in this one.
Sure.
So I like that you can't do everything, and so the different players around the table end up specializing in different things.
Right.
So, you know, I might end up like having a bunch of cards, but my people suck at moving, so I don't really end up conquering a lot.
Right.
You might roll more dice, but have no re-roll, so you get what you get.
Right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, each one of the boards has slightly different numbers on it for the tracks. Did you feel like that made a difference against the people you were playing? Did you feel like they really had a player power?
I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to ask a similar question. Yeah.
I feel like it did, or I wanted it to, I should say. You know what I mean? It did, but only if the dice rolled, they rolled the right way. You know what I mean? Like, so I kind of went into it with like, hey, I want to do this, seeing what my numbers are, how I can kind of combo this together if I focus on this track or that. But if the dice aren't there, they're just not there. You know what I mean? So it's one of those, I really wanted it to be more so. I think I ended up being a little more frustrated by that than actually felt like it played out. Because it's like, that's just not, I keep getting the people one, but great, I have people, but they can't go anywhere, or, you know, whatever. And so I wasn't able to have as much control over the track variants as I wanted.
And I did, because I felt the same way, and I wish that, because there's one track that lets you re-roll the dice, Yahtzee style, up to, I think, like 4 times on a turn. But once again, like, if that doesn't come up early on in the game, you don't have that mitigation. You don't have that opportunity for that. And so you can't really control the rest of your board.
I did really, I'm sorry, not to
Go.
I did really like, though, that the point structure is different between the 4 tracks, you know? So the really powerful ones, beginning a game, it's really powerful to have those re-rolls, right? But the closer you get to the end game, it's not as powerful. But I believe that's one of the highest tracks, right? Yeah, that's like the highest scoring track. And so I do think that was really interesting, and that was a neat balance that they gave.
And I think you're talking more specifically about the differences between the factions.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And I think it's there. I also would not say this is a particularly asymmetric feeling game.
Yeah.
No.
I like that they're different. I also can't recommend this to someone who likes Cosmic Encounter because you're different in it, you know, from the other players. But I do like it. It's more of a back of the brain thing for me.
It is. I was really surprised that in the 2-player mode, there are only 2 factions you can play with. You can only play with the yellow and the orange.
Yeah.
And with them not being that different, that surprised me.
Yeah, I think I guess that's an interesting point. I wouldn't call it asymmetric either. I feel like it's almost faux asymmetric in that, yeah, there are some slight differences, but really I think all they're going to do is kind of help determine what your starting strategy is going to be, because you're a little better at something than somebody else who you probably want to try to utilize that, you know, until you can start bumping up tracks, and then you're kind of, that's when the one thing is going to be better for you because you're pushing it type of a thing than somebody else. So
I mean, the cards are also different.
They are.
I mean, about half the deck is the same.
Yeah.
And then the other half has some variances. So there are some things, but it is, again, I keep coming back to the word slight.
Yes.
And that's how the sort of asymmetrical nature of it feels to me.
If you don't mind, I was going to talk a little bit about the area control, because like you said, that's really, everything is driving this central map, right? Where you're kind of, the thing that I feel like worked best for that, and I mentioned this right after the first time I played the game, is that you don't ever lose your people off the board.
100%.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that was a very smart decision, design decision, because I feel like the game would have felt crushing and punishing if you were losing your people off of the map. Really, what they do is they get kind of relocated, right? And that was a smart decision because you never feel like you're going to be completely wiped out. And so what were your thoughts on the area control? Like, usually area control can feel very punishing. It didn't feel punishing here.
I feel like I simultaneously liked it more because of that, but then I also felt like it didn't have a huge impact. I could spread across the whole board, and yet still all I can move up is 1 on yellow if I roll a yellow die. Like, I don't feel like I don't feel like the area control mattered that much. Like, oh, I steal a city, now I don't have to go back in that area. I stole your city, I'm done over there.
You staying there, though, stops me from being in there, and I would have to waste time to get back in.
So that you can move up in that color.
It almost doesn't feel, to me, I was going to say I like it, but it almost doesn't really feel like area control.
It feels like you're you're like getting
it's like action
access
denial.
To an right.
It's more like action denial. Like,
access to an action.
In fact, even in the rule book, they're like, hey, if you have a movement left, nothing to do with it, you should still try to push someone off of a space.
Right.
Because they have to spend effort to get back in. You can deny them maybe. You're making their die rolling worse by simply giving them access to fewer colors. And I think that the game is very subtle in a lot of ways, where if you look at the broad things, you're like, combat in this game is simplistic.
Right.
Area control is dumb. Your people just bounce right back, and then you just walk in there next turn. All those things don't, at face value, seem a little basic, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think it's just subtle little things where you might want to, like, it's more again, that action denial of, well, I want you to fight for this because I want you to spend time wasting time trying to get back in here just so you can do it.
Right.
That kind of idea. I do like that.
I did like the form of attacking. Maybe it's the Euroer in me, but I could just calculate it. I'd be like, I can go here, here, and here, and I can succeed at this dice roll.
I like it too.
I like how straightforward that is.
I like that as much as there's so much luck in the game with the dice roll and where you can go and what track you can go up. I like that wasn't in the combat, that the combat was straightforward. I think between that and then you were just speaking of the people not being able to, the action denial, you know, that you talked about. I think those are probably the biggest charms of the game for me, is that it's area control-ish, you know, and then that you do still have that mathematical strategy of like, okay, how can I min-max this die roll and make sure that I can get the right tracks that I'm going for, you know.
I did enjoy the engine building in it, that feeling of getting stronger, of, oh, I can roll more dice, which means I can move more, I can attack more, and all those things, I can move up more on tracks. Like, I enjoyed that aspect of it, of the feeling of growing.
And I especially liked, and this is a weird thing because it's a negative thing, but I especially liked about maybe 2/3 of the way through the game where I look at my board and I go, I really don't have enough people on the board. Or I really need to roll more dice. That idea of I'm doing well in some things, but the pressure points are the ones I'm focusing on, right? Because I can see that, man, if I have a hard time conquering you because you have all 7, you have 7 of your people on the board and I have the 4 I began with or whatever. So I do like that based on what you've been able to do, other things start to press on you.
Right.
And I enjoyed that.
What are our thoughts on the cards? As you mentioned, we all have our own deck of cards. Some of them are, common cards that we all have, and others are specific to us. But when you move up on that green track, you get another card. And if it seems like, especially later in the game, there's an issue, if it's an issue, where you get a card and you're basically just hoping that it's going to be something that already is occurring on the board. It's less going to be something you're working towards and more like, let's hope this is happening already. You see what I'm getting at? Let's hope I'm already in 3 spots. Let's hope I'm already whatever the
I have 2 cities
I have 2 cities out. Did they feel a little arbitrary? Because they felt a little arbitrary to me. I guess I'm leading the witness, Your Honor.
No, that's fine. I think 2 things. They do seem less than thrilling. They're just kind of not that exciting, you know. But I think the deck is so tiny you could learn it.
You could.
Right? So you know which ones you go through and like, I still have the one that wants me to cluster up. Maybe I should do that
That's
in
a good
case
point.
I hit it.
That's a good point.
And then also you can just chuck a card to change a die.
Yes.
Which is, I feel like their primary use, really.
Right.
Yeah,
because they're not that many points.
and you're
Not that many
it
points.
does make a difference.
And
but
you're probably
yeah.
not going to get that many throughout the game either.
Unless you're really
Unless
going
you're
on
really
pushing that green
yeah.
track.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But then if you are getting that many cards, you're unlikely to be fulfilling them because
Right.
you need like a lot of people on the board, or you need specific places on the board. So you're likely just using them to change dice.
Right.
Yeah, you said less than thrilling. I think my word would be frustrating. My first play of them, I was so frustrated by them because it's just like, okay, another useless card, but I was trying to look at them as like, not contract fulfillments, but something like that, like goals and goals. And so looking at them from that, it was just incredibly frustrating. Every card, I think I ended up drawing like 2 or 3 of them, and I just finally gave up on them. Second play, I switched, the mentality and did use them more so to change the die face to kind of, get into that strategy that I set with
Right,
different columns,
right.
and that was, then we'll say less than thrilling. No,
No,
so
they're
we went
not.
from frustrating to less than thrilling, but it is that mindset change that you have to wrap around that dual purpose of them.
Right. Yeah. Besides the artwork in this game, I would say nothing here is splashy.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing here that is like sexy. It's just the game is sort of basic in it's sort of workman-like in
Yes.
many ways. And I like that everything that they try to do is handled in about the simplest way possible.
I agree
You
with
put
that.
out a city. Is it still on the board at the end? Score it. Did you step into someone else's city? Take it. How do you step in there? More dudes. Like,
Yes.
that's it. Like, everything is so straightforward
Right.
that I could absolutely see some people playing this game and being just falling asleep at the
Right,
wheel,
right.
because it's just not splashy.
It's not. Yeah, you're right. I think the only exception to that would be kind of how you have the different phases that you can change the dice to the swords. That's the only but you're right. Other than that, everything is like very, very elegant and streamlined.
Yes. Which
and-
is this designer's bread and
Right.
butter. I mean, that's most of Eric Vogel's games are super clean and
Right.
minimalistic.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's the biggest upside of the game is that it is relatively easy and intuitive. I think intuitive is probably the.
It is.
Yeah.
I would say it
Yeah,
is.
I think so.
All right. So anything else, or are we ready for final thoughts?
I'm ready to rock and
Let's
roll.
do it.
Mike, I feel the heat coming in. You're coming in hot on this one. What are you dropping on here?
So this is a game that is perfectly fine. Okay, it's a game I would play. It is not a game that I'm going to seek out, and it's not a game that I can fully recommend. I'm giving it a 6. And part of the reason is I feel like the very scope of it, as we've mentioned, it's a pretty small, compact, tight game. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of game arc here. I don't feel like repeat plays are going to show me things I haven't seen much already, other than the one thing you mentioned, which is getting to know your deck better. I feel like if you do get to know your deck, then maybe you can be a little more clever with your plays trying to set up for those cards. But that's a pretty
minor.
small thing.
Yeah,
that's a
minor.
pretty small thing. I just, playing the different civilizations, okay, it's not going to change all that
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is that I feel like it's a game that does things well. It's perfectly fine, but there's nothing about it that's exciting to me. There's nothing about this game that makes me want to show it to somebody else and go, oh, you got to play this game. You know what I
that's a
mean?
good point.
Because it
Right,
just doesn't do anything really exceedingly better than other games that do similar things. So that's where I'm at, is 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm at a 6.5. I have a lot of very similar feelings to you, Mike, of just I feel like the decisions in this game are not that interesting. I feel like they're pretty straightforward. I roll dice, and then I move my guys where my dice colors are, or just to get in someone's way. Like, I don't feel like there's a lot there. Going into it, I had really hoped that the building up of tracks and the moving around on the board, I thought that would be more interesting to me than it actually ended up being, which is why it's 6.5. But at the end of the day, like, I do still enjoy tracks. I do still enjoy the clean battle system that it has. Like, it's very mathematical to me, and I appreciate that.
I'm giving it a 7.5. It's still, you're right, that the replayability is probably my main concern. I think the replayability here is a little flat. I think it scales well, though. I have played with the entire sort of game, a number of players spectrum, and does scale well, which is interesting. I wasn't expecting necessarily a 2-player game to go that interestingly, but it does. I thought it did. I guess I really like the elegance. Is such an overused word when it comes to games, but I do like the simplicity and the elegance. I think it works well. This is a small game, yes. Going into this one expecting a dudes on a map game is a giant folly.
Yeah.
But I think if you know what you're getting and you do enjoy that some minor optimizing, I keep having fun with it. I don't know what else to say really. So yeah, I do like it. 7.5 for me.
Okay, I'm coming in at a 6.5 for this one. I think I do not feel like it scaled well. I did not enjoy my 4-player game of it at all. Like that is not something I ever want to. I would do it for my job if I needed to. That's about the only time I'd do it. But I really enjoyed the lower player counts. Okay. And I think that's just because on the 4-player, it's just going round and around. You're looking at something completely different by the time it comes to your turn. So there's no planning ahead. I think it wipes out a lot of the strategy behind it. And so then it really is with that less strategy, which means there's more luck, and maybe you don't have quite enough mitigation for it. And it also just significantly lengthened the game to where you're sitting there because it's a complete new board when it comes to your turn. You have all that, almost that AP, where people are taking 5 minutes per turn, and so maybe a little exaggeration, but it felt like it.
Yeah. And
so that was, I had a problem with the scaling, but I really enjoyed the 2-player, and so I think my happy medium between those 2-player counts is that 6.5. I was really charmed again by the simplicity of it, area control that doesn't feel crushing, and again we say it's maybe because it's not really area control, but I did like that of it. So yeah, I'm coming in at a 6.5. I'd be happy to play it at a lower player count.
But not at 4.
But not at 4.
Unless it's for your job.
Unless Tom tells me to.
Got it. Got it. Well, there you go, folks. That's if there's one takeaway here today is Camilla's not going to be playing this at 4. Unless she has to.
Right.
So there we go. That is First Empires, everybody. That's going to do it for us. Thanks very much for watching. My name is Z Garcia.
I'm Camilla Cleghorn.
I'm Mike Delicio.
And I'm Wendy Yee.
We will see you on the next one. Go roll some dice.